You know, a lot of time people talk about entertainment as being fluff, but I think it is as old as civilization. There's a need to tell stories. We can grow from them, we can learn from them. And my hope is that we keep doing that.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Interview from the Line.info. Today I'm happy and excited to welcome back actor and director Joshua Bitton. He, along with thousands of other actors in the Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, reached an agreement between their unions and the major Hollywood studios on November 9th. That put an end to 118 days of strikes, and today we're going to talk about the agreement itself and the implications of that agreement on actors and the entertainment industry. Joshua, it is great and fantastic to see you again.
I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to be at what I hope is the end of this strike. Obviously, we've come to an agreement, and now it's up to membership to ratify. So people have been voting. So we'll see. I think December 5th is the deadline. So we'll know for certain if it's really over. But I'm hopeful.
So let's start with that, actually. Let's start with the ratification process for those who are not aware. How does that work exactly?
So the union negotiates. Members of the union and Duncan, who was hired, who's a, a union negotiator. That's what he does by profession. They represent us. They go through what were months of negotiations and lack of negotiations, etc. And then once they come to an agreement, the first thing that happens is the SAG board, which are people who are voted into position, they vote to either approve or not. The SAG board in this instance voted, I believe it was 86% to approve the contract. So once it passes the SAG board, it goes out to us as members. There was a number of Zoom town halls and Instagram lives and things like that were hosted by various members of the negotiating committee so that actors could get details and ask questions. We were emailed sort of I believe it was an 18-page breakdown of what is, I think, a 120-page actual contract, giving us sort of the bullet points and some of the legal terms, etc. People start texting each other, start calling each other, asking questions. And now we're in the process of voting. And everyone gets a postcard and an email sent to them with a PIN number. You go in, you vote, and then we wait. That's kind of the process.
Since the agreement came out, or since the agreement was accepted, at least, what has been the general feeling among the actors?
From my circle, it's been mixed. There's a lot of people. I think initially people were very much in a, oh, thank God, this is over, because actors, like most creatives, like writers and dancers and painters, we just want to we just want to create. We want to tell stories. And for most of the people in my circle who do this, we do this more because we feel we need to, less than we want to be famous. So I think there was a sigh of relief. We all, I think, had a feeling that the agreement had some sticky details, because when the offer was given to SAG, um, our negotiating committee, along with our president, Fran Drescher, spent, I believe it was 4 days, mulling back and forth the details of it. And just as a comparison, when the writers got their offer, the next morning it came out that all the details, and they sent it out to ratify immediately. So I think a lot of us knew, okay, it's not everything that they were hoping for, which I think is normal in a negotiation. But one of the things that has been a common thread in these in in the entertainment business negotiations is that the directors get the most. They always do. There's less of them, and and they have a certain amount of power. They direct sports. They, so, and there's only one per episode of a TV show or what have you. Then the writers get less than the directors, but more than we get, and we tend to get the least amount. There are more actors working. We have principals, we have extras, we have a lot of people, but in general, that seems to be how it goes. In this instance, I think a lot of us thought that this ratification process, or that the deal process, was going to be a lot faster. The writers, had a really protracted strike. We followed suit. They got their deal. Many of us thought it was going to be a week, and it wound up. They came to the table, they left the table, and then they came back with the offer that they had, which they called a last, final, and best offer, which a friend of mine who's a working television actress laughed at and said, "What does that mean? If we say no, there's no more TV ever again?" You know, but I think our union, looking at everything and everything that they fought for, thought in the end that the deal was best. So now we'll see what the membership says.
It's interesting that you had mentioned that the time, it was the time that it took to ratify that, because it was December 5th as the last date, you said, right?
I think it's the last day of voting. Yeah.
Why so long? Why take that much time?
Well, we have a large membership, and our membership spans the country. So we've got actors in New York, LA, Chicago. We've got actors in Vancouver, Toronto. Uh, I mean, New Orleans, Atlanta, uh, as well as in Utah and Oklahoma and all over the country, in Austin, Texas. So I think that we have these pockets of information. Here in LA, I was on the lines quite a bit, as were a lot of my fellows, and so there was a lot of conversation. In New York, definitely. I would imagine Chicago had a pretty lively scene as well. But in some smaller towns where there aren't exactly headquarters for Netflix or Amazon, I think membership there maybe wasn't getting, didn't have the same conversations going on a daily basis. So SAG wants to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to get the information, mull it over, and have ample time to look and vote. Um, so I think that's why. I think that we're far more spread out than the other union memberships are.
Recalling back to the first interview, uh, you had said that things in the entertainment world had reached a tipping point as a result of things like automation and more technology that was being incorporated into entertainment viewing, or whatever. Um, I wanted to ask, how do you think that the industry will tip as a result of this new contract? And what effect will it have? What effect do you think it will have on actors and other workers in the industry?
That's a great question, and the what I know will happen, I don't, right, and I wish I did, but I have concerns for sure. When the deal came through after a few months of nearly 4 months of picketing, uh, it hit me in a way it hadn't before, because the deal for AI is, there are 2 points in it that I think a lot of actors are worried about. One is they have to give us full consent, right? And it has to be in a separate piece of paper, a rider, so it's not hidden in a contract. So that this way our reps and ourselves can go, I choose to let you use or create an AI image of me for a scene or whatnot, or I don't. The one protection it seems we don't have is that if I say no, the studio, from what I could gather, has the right to say, well, then we're going to hire someone else who says yes. So, in that regard, there is a little bit of what feels like we've been pushed up against a wall a little bit. We want to work. There is compensation for you if they do use your AI image, and so that was concerning. The other concerning element is that, and again, to the best of my understanding, there's a lot of legalese and things, but the best of my understanding, they can, if they deem necessary, create a character that is completely AI. No actor voicing it, no actor doing like what Andy Serkis did, where you are physicalizing the movement. They digitize your movements to, say, a dragon or Gollum or something along those lines. But SAG has to approve their usage of that at this time. So there will be a lot of sort of hemming and hawing backwards and forwards. When I saw all that, I went, wait a second, this is craziness. Because when you make a film or a TV show, or do a piece of theater for that matter, which is a different union, but still, one of the most remarkable experiences I think a lot of actors and uh, crew and designers get is we build these families and you work together for 1 month, 3 months, 7 months, multiple years if you're on a show that goes that long. And a lot of those friendships really last. So the idea that someone would prefer to use less humans and just have a computer create story kind of cracked me in the face. And I went, that's crazy. Right. I think that's a fear. I did a little bit of research and had when we got the deal, and a good friend of mine, whose name is Andy, he sent me this link about AI. And at this point, AI is quite expensive. It's quite expensive to do, it's quite expensive to create. So our deal is a 2.5 year deal. And when that deal is up, we will renegotiate as we do. And I have a very good friend named Amir who has been active in the union and is he works. Everybody knows Amir. He's been in everything. And Amir was talking about, he did an Instagram post saying, this is what happens every time we negotiate a contract. We negotiate a contract, we get a deal. The producers, because this is what they do and this is their job, is they find a way to wiggle behind that deal and screw us over so they can make as much money as possible. We find out the loopholes, they find out the loopholes, and then 3 years later we renegotiate and we try to close those loopholes. Now, some of those we've been unsuccessful at, like residuals and things like that when it comes to streaming and cable, has always been a real sore point for actors. And we can get to residuals in a second if you want to ask about that. When I heard about and what he said was, if we don't ratify this deal, we go back to the 2020 deal, which has no AI protection at all, and then we have to reapprove a strike, and then we don't start with the deal we just negotiated, we start over. And then that means the deal could get worse or it could stay the same. But a lot of people felt that the AMPTP would not come back to the table till February, March at the earliest. So when I listened to what felt like some reason, and also did a little research into what it would cost them to do AI, I thought, with the protections we have, which is far more than we had before because we had none, it's a move up. And so for me, I went from being really unsure about the deal to going, I think I'm going to vote yes on this, simply because people that I trust with a lot more information filled me with information that made me go, I can be maybe a little less scared. You know, my my I was thinking about this morning. I think probably because we were going to sit down and talk. There are certain actors, very famous actors. Frances McDormand is one who has writers in her contract that say things like half the crew has to be female. And by doing so has assured, at least as far as I remember, has assured that there's more quality, at least on set she's on. And maybe there's a chance down the road that actors like that with that kind of power will say, in this film, because I'm a known commodity and I can therefore garner a little weight, throw my weight around, all characters must be voiced, portrayed, or physicalized by humans, which would be great. So, but that's not in our contract. So where we go, I don't know. My hope is that um, one, the public, I think, is part of this, because during the pandemic and definitely during this strike, obviously Barbie and it was a massive hit, and Oppenheimer was a massive hit, but a lot of other films and new TV shows didn't get a lot of momentum because the famous actors weren't out there doing junkets and interviews, and it gave me a little bit of hope because I realized a lot of people love actors' work, but also become fans of the humans. So all of this is what I'm hoping helps us garner more and more protection as we move further down the line, because all we want to do is tell stories, and we want to tell stories with our friends, and even if they're people I don't know, by the time we're done telling the story, they tend to become friends. And that sense of community and family has always been something that I really value in what I get to do for a living. So I'm choosing to remain hopeful. There's definitely a lot of fear that they're going to replace us, that they're going to make everything digitized, and a computer will study your performance and learn the the quirks of me, and then create a me. And I didn't get to do it myself. But at this point, it doesn't seem we're fully there. So I'll take the protections we have and hope that we're able to build on them. You know, I don't know if I really answer the question because I don't know where we're going, but I know what the fear is amongst membership, especially with the idea that some characters, because if a character's created completely digitally, no hair, no makeup, no lighting people, nothing, all of that stuff is just done on a computer and plugged into a final product. And I think those people are my friends too, hair and makeup and set and grips. I we all deserve to work. And I think we're at this with the tipping point we're talking about. I think we're at this as a species, like we have to protect our work. We have to agree, regardless of money, that we want us all to have purpose and things to do and take those skills and use them, you know?
Okay, I guess I have really ultimately two questions here.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So, why are major studios going the AI direction? Okay, that's my first question. My second question is, will this also impact independent productions as well?
I think that depends. I'm going to go in reverse order. With independent productions, they tend to have less money, right? And a lot of times, independent productions, like films in particular, are dependent on cast, because cast helps them garner financing. You get, uh, I don't know, Viola Davis or John Bernthal or someone like that to do your film. They command a certain amount of box office in the country and overseas. So I think with smaller independent films, uh, I think that is always a kind of familial thing. We're all in this together, creating something for less money, hoping to make a product that's really special, that is able to break through. That being said, what defines an independent film is always tricky because there are $30 million independent films made. And I think in that regard, it's a little bit of a different game. The question as to why, I mean, this brings up, you mentioned this when we were sort of talking about what we'd be talking about Justine Bateman, who I did a play with once and is a remarkably smart person. Um, and I don't know why. I would have to assume in the long run, the reason why is one thing and one thing only, and that's money. And that by being able to have my image in perpetuity, right? And there's talk of this, like after you die, your estate may get something, but there they could do a new season of a television show where every actor has passed away and allow AI and its ability to learn people's mannerisms and rhythms to create a whole other season. And now they're doing that for far less money because they don't have crew. They don't have, if they use AI writing, which I believe they are not allowed to do according to the WGA contract. But then they hire a writer, they'd hire a director or a computer programmer to oversee it. So then they cut out the rest of us working. I'd have to assume because, like I said, when I looked at the contract, my brain did melt a little bit and go, oh, whoa, that's right. They want to have less of us working. And that is a very scary prospect. It's hard for me to fathom why, but it's the same kind of idea of, I think, any industry. You could, and they do, automate factories. But if you go to an automated factory, you've got your management team and then a bunch of robotics doing the work. And that to me feels like a nightmare of where I would go to work, because I want to interact with the people that I've come to know and love. And even the ones I've come to know and dislike, it still is human interaction. So it's hard for me to really wrap my head around it. And one of the things that Justine, I read one of the articles that Justine Bateman was talking about. She said, well, in my productions, when I'm writing, I want people there, and that's who I will hire. And I think we're going to find out, how many people view it that way and how many people view it the other. And and I think every 3 years we're going to have this fight, and I hope that, I mean, there's so much money being made that there is a part of me that thinks, isn't it enough that you can make billions of dollars? Some of us can eke out a living. Some of us do really well, but it's a teeny, teeny, teeny percentage. Sorry about that. And then, that we're all making enough that you don't need to ice us out. But it really does a number on my psyche when I think about the why, because I just wouldn't, I personally wouldn't want it, you know? So that's a question for them, you know, I think. And I'd have to think the only answer is money, because the only one that makes any sense to me.
Okay. I mean, because you had mentioned earlier that AI would be expensive to use now.
Now, but the fact of the matter is it's expensive now, but like anything, there are, my friend was just telling me about a program. He's an engineer. There's a program that, like, the world's largest supercomputer with a certain amount of math would take 40 years for it to go through this entire sequence of mathematics. And now there's a program that can do it in a minute and 10 seconds. So as that kind of stuff develops, if they can get their foothold in it now, we'll have to keep fighting to protect our jobs, because at one point they'll be able to go, this kind of story with this kind of person doing this kind of thing, or this script that was written by a human because of a contract negotiated, and plug in humans, fake humans, synthetic humans, and that they'll be able to do it faster and cheaper. It's the only reason I could think they fought so hard, because it was the biggest sticking point from whatever all of us have heard from the negotiations.
We're definitely going to talk about the more about the AI provisions later. Um, let's take a look right now about let's take a look at residuals and some of that. We'll talk about what's in it, what compromises were made, and maybe do a little bit of comparison to see how that compares now to what they were initially offering. With regards to broadcast and streaming residuals, and please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, residual payments for primetime reruns will go up with the amount of the payment based on whatever payment schedule the actor is in and the length of the episode that aired, whether it's a half hour or a full hour show. A report from Variety talks about how the union was not able to secure revenue sharing for streaming services. I want to talk about that. There were some proposals that were put forward, like a 57-cent fee for every subscriber. But that was rejected. Instead, what was offered was a $40 million per year fund that will be established to pay out actors in a streaming or SVOD or subscription video on demand series. 75% of that fund will go to actors who appear on projects watched by at least 20% of a streamer's subscribers within the first 90 days of release, and the other 25% will be discretionary to be given to other performance working in SVOD under a revenue sharing model. That's per a report from Variety. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that all will work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, we stick with the residuals we have, and then that's sort of added with built-in raises. So it's a I mean, this is a brand new model, right? So I don't know exactly how it's going to work out. I will say that as an actor like myself, who has for the most part made my living doing guest stars, some recurs on some shows, I'm very much like a gigging actor. Like I go in, I do a job, I work for a week or two on that TV show, sometimes for a month, and then I go and look for the next job. And a lot of those I have done have been network. And network residuals are pretty good. And for those who don't know, actors, we qualify for health insurance based on earnings. So for me, between the jobs that I get and the residuals that I've received, I have been lucky enough to have insurance for a consistent amount of time. But I have also noticed my residuals go down because network is where the money's at. But now network reruns less because they can stream more. And by doing so, the residuals, say, in the first year of a season that you do a guest star, let's say, where you're on the entire episode, there's a max residual. I don't know what it is now, but based on the percentage that the raise is supposed to be, it should be somewhere around $3,900, which is the max. So if you make 10 grand, you make 3,900. If you make 6 grand, you make 3,900. If you make 2,500, you make 2,500. So it's up to that amount. and and those residuals would be really good. So in that first season that you recorded the show, every rerun after the first airing, which is already paid for, you could make that money. And usually you'd get one, maybe two of those residuals. And if you did 5 guest stars in a year between residuals and earning, you'll qualify for health insurance, and you might be able to like eke out a living in a city like LA or New York. But chances are you might need a side job or book a couple other jobs. Just the math. I've watched those residuals go down because they rerun less. So the reruns for like a streaming residual, instead of $3,900, might be like 500. So it's far less. So I've watched them go down. I'm glad we got this bump, and I'm very curious to see how it operates because it's also based on the success of shows. So if you're on shows that are less successful, I would imagine you're getting part of that 25% that's not going to the actor that was on the show, but as a so we'll see. I mean, theoretically, it's more money than I'm getting, right? So that's a bonus. Just like there are built-in raises for all of our pay scales, and those are to me kind of standard in these negotiations. Maybe a little bit more this time because of the other things that we had a hard time fighting for. So it'll make being a middle class actor, which most of us are, if not struggling, because only a very small percentage are really wealthy. It might make it a little bit more tenable. We'll see what the next few years are like, because how much, generationally, very few people I know, definitely under the age of 40, but definitely under the age of 30, that have any kind of cable. Everything they do is stream. Everything they do is an app. So they go to the CBS app, they go to the Showtime app, they go, or Max, they go to all those individual places. So this new residual stream is going to hopefully prove to be really lucrative for us, because if it's not, we're going to find a lot of actors like myself who go, well, I'm not making the residuals I was, and without getting that great big job of a TV show that I'm on for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, this may become financially unsustainable. So I don't know. Like I said, it's more than we were getting for streaming, but everything is shifting to streaming. So will it approach what I was making when network television was really the thing. Um, I hope, but I just don't fully know. You know, we wanted that piece of subscribers because these streamers changed the model. The business model was you did a show, they sold advertising, they made money from advertising, you got paid. Well, now they've all changed this model to there's no advertising, or there's advertising on Hulu, but you could pay extra and there'll be no advertising. So they changed the model and then turned to us and said, we're not making as much money as we were. And where they're going, well, you changed the model. So if you change the model and we're not getting a cut of that, then we should get a cut of this. And that was the time, from what I understand, when they walked away from the table. And we went 2 weeks with no negotiation. They said that was a dead end. So then they came up with this other model. I have to think that Fran and Duncan and the negotiating committee are far more schooled on these details than I am. I voted for them. We voted for them as a union. Some people did, some people didn't, but overall we did. I have to trust that. I mean, one, they're actors, other than Duncan, so they're not trying to screw themselves over. So I have to hope that the math made enough sense to them that they thought this is as good as we're going to get, and this is something to build on and grow on. Because if we look at other residuals, it would mean that if it's 20%, then in the next contract it might go up to a 22% share, and then after that maybe it'll go up to 24% or something along those lines. So my hope is that it's a jumping off point, that we learn in the next 2.5 years, does this work? And if it doesn't, we're going to have a real fight, because residuals have, once we got cable and we gave them this, you can do buyouts for 13 weeks, we never got the residuals we deserved on cable, you know, ever. I watched shows I was on rerun 12 times in 3 months, but I got one $2,700 buyout. If that had been on network television, I'd have made $50,000, and would have been able to exhale for the rest of the year, in some regard. So we're going to see.
I think I can't remember where it was that I had read it, but I guess part of the agreement is that the streaming services have to reveal viewership numbers to the union, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's now showing some greater transparency on the part of streaming services where they didn't release that before. You know, that must have been really difficult for the services to sort of concede to that. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because in France, it's a law. And so French actors, like with Netflix, they know how many times a show's been aired. They have to know because they get paid dependent on it. So they they said it was an impossibility, or also I think they wanted a high transparency. There are many theories as to why. Some people were saying, well, some of the streamers might actually be losing money and they don't want people to know that. I don't really know. That's above my pay grade. I mean, I'd love to know. But I think when SAG said, look, give us a percentage, give us 57 cents per subscriber or whatever that is. And they said, oh, no way. And then this became the offering. The only way this offering works is based upon viewership. So they they obviously were willing to give that information up, because the way the deal goes, the more popular your show is, the higher the residual becomes. So you need to be on a very, very popular show to earn what they're talking about. And so they had to reveal their numbers, and I'm glad they do, because nothing will give us more power in further in later negotiations than to be able to say this show got this many viewers, this percentage, and unless you want to lose this show, these actors demand this kind of raise. So, in some regard, it will empower actors that are on those shows, and writers. I'd have to imagine. Um, but I think it's a negotiation. So we didn't get everything we wanted. They didn't get everything they wanted. There were things we had to give up and things they had to give up. And I think that clearly that's a battle that we won, because that was the only way I think they could find some kind of bridge for this residual situation.
Okay, I know we talked about artificial intelligence. We've hit on some really great points. One of the points, going back to Miss Bateman's, excuse me, um, concerns. She says one of her concerns were that an actor's ethnicity can be replaced with another's to suit the viewing needs of a particular market. And she also mentions, among the many challenges that these new AI provisions will result in, um, how might you see your ability to work be affected by such things?
That is a really interesting question because over the last few years, it's not, it's still, we still haven't hit a place of fairness, but there's been definitely more of a mindfulness that I think is a demand by the American public to have better representation on television. So I think or hope that, let's say I did a show and they decided to show that show somewhere else, right? Korea, or just in certain parts of the country that were more black, more Latin, more this, more that, and they changed my ethnicity to make it more appealing to people. Um, I would hope there would be a massive uproar that they had done that, because there are, as we've talked about representation, there are roles that probably 5, 8 years ago I could have auditioned for that now it's not really acceptable for me to play someone of a certain ethnicity or someone of a certain sexual orientation that's different from mine. And so I would hope that the market would regulate that, in some regard. But when you have, to Justine's point, when you have these corporations with these massive amounts of money and influence because they control media and things like that, could they take advantage of it? For sure. Could they, I mean, I think that's a sort of big, almost age old question. It's like 1984. Are they going to, like the Orwell book, are they going to try and control thought? And I think those things are real concerns, and I think we need the Justine Batemans of the world, and everyone else. We talked about this last time. The UPS, I believe the UPS strike. I think that those men and women and the people involved, they really fought hard and they got a really good deal with a great raise and protections against driverless vehicles and things like that. This is the fight we're in, until money becomes a thing that doesn't signify whether something's successful or not, or a person is successful or not, and that may or may never happen. uh, then this is the battle. Then we are going to have to fight for our place. And I think there's all kinds of scary things about them, because creating AI, because do they use my AI image to have me walk in the background of a scene because I'm shooting another movie, and they ask for permission and they pay me for the day, but now they've created an AI Josh, and a, a ghost company that creates a movie that gets put out somehow, and they're backdoor collecting funds, like all that kind of stuff could happen, you know so I it's tiring because it feels existential as a crisis, and I feel like all of us, from the pandemic to the divide in the country, so many things, to wars all over the world, everything feels like this massive existential tipping point. And I would just like a regular problem, like your cholesterol's high, you got to change your diet. Great. But you might no longer be needed as a human being. I don't understand. I what does that mean? So I think Justine raises really, really valuable points. And I think, I can't tell people how they should vote. I can't. I'm leaning towards voting to approve from the information I've done and the conversations I've had with people who know more about this than I do. But I think those concerns are real. They're scary, and if it's too expensive now, but in 8 years or 10 years or 6 years, it's not. We better get protections in place that make sure they got to keep hiring us, or we're going to find that greed is more powerful than care of other people.
Turning on to other matters, during our initial discussion, you had expressed how the studios were negotiating with the union, which seemed that, based on your description, that they were more interested in just people agreeing with their terms than meeting the union halfway on any sort of compromise. In fact, there was a video that Miss Drescher had posted on her Instagram page where they were at the negotiating table and the team was there, and then she announced that the AMPTP negotiators had walked out of the room. You see the camera pan back. There's nobody in the room except them. Is it possible to gauge from your perspective? I know you weren't in the room, but how their approach changed in the last negotiation?
Yeah, I mean, my perception of it is this. I think they thought that we would fold. And I think they underestimated the fact that actors in general are out of work far more than we have work. So, not having work is an active part of our careers. And we all knew that this was a remarkably important moment in our union's history. So, I think they thought they would give us an offer and then we would take it, or that we would throw some small things back and they would walk away with most of what they wanted. I think that they walked away from that table, and what I found on the strike lines was a tremendous amount of energy and positivity. People being, even because we couldn't see each other at work, we could see each other on the lines, and and so I think they might have underestimated that. And then we went back to the table and they came back with a deal that was worse from what we were told than what they'd initially offered. And we came back, and Fran and the team put forth, an offer, and they did the same thing, which is exactly what they did to the writers. As a friend of mine said, they love a reboot. And so, they did what they do. They, like, all of a sudden it's like the 19th version of Batman. It's the eighth different Spider-Man. They just bring the same things back. Well, they tried the exact same tactic with us. They came back, they walked away, and they said, well, that's it. And then it came back to the table, and we got a lot of what we sought after. I think the biggest thing, at least, the two biggest things, are the way streaming residuals are being done, and obviously AI. We got improvements in both, but I think a lot of us would have wanted more, because I definitely have a show that I was on as a regular, as a series regular, which means I was in every episode and paid, pretty decent rate. And I don't think a lot of people watched it, but it has been streamable for 5 years, and I've made $0 in residuals off of that show. So what I want to, what a lot of us were talking about is, much like cable, I don't know why it's not a 13-week, 26-week, or yearly buyout. That for every year your show is streamable, there's a baseline pay, and then if it's really popular, you get more depending on views. So we didn't get that, and I don't know if that was a model that is actually sustainable. Um, but it is definitely is definitely something a lot of actors were talking about, and I would say that I think at least the AMPTP realized that they had to show up. You know, when the Bob Igers of the world were in the negotiating room, we were looking at a different negotiation, and I think they thought they didn't have to do that. So I would imagine and hope that that means we garnered some human to human respect, and I think that that is important for how we move forward.
Since we were talking about UPS earlier, um, we've seen in the news sort of their prominence, even now, as of late, it seems, whether it be on a local or national level. And while unions have their critics, both internal and external, they are still a driving force for the economy here in the United States. Now, with that said, Deadline reported in October, and I quote, the summer of Hollywood strikes had cost the economy of Southern California an estimated $6.5 billion and the loss of 45,000 jobs. This contract that was just agreed upon will be up for renegotiation in 3 years. What do you think needs to happen on both sides of the union and the studios to avert another strike that will affect the local economy in this fashion?
I think, I mean, one, I want to say that at least from the actors I know, the strike happened because we felt like we had no choice. That if we would have not approved the strike, we would have gotten the deal that they offered, which was a complete railroad. And also, I don't know an actor who wasn't aware. You know, my friends and I actually put together a benefit at my theater company here in LA for IATSE, and we raised about $10,000, which is probably a drop in the bucket for what those people need. But we were all aware of them being out of work, and I will say that on the lines, uh, Teamsters, IATSE people, they all showed up. They showed up with their T-shirts saying "We stand with you." So I think we all are aware that this is kind of what we're looking at. I think that to avoid another strike, I think that that there needs to be some light conversation that constantly happens over the next 2.5 years. To be like, this is what we're getting from our membership. This is what our numbers are showing us as producers. How do we bridge this gap so that we don't show up and need to strike? That there is, it's kind of, I think of it like sports. You know, someone says they want a new contract, and we know pretty fast, according to like ESPN, whether that athlete is going to walk out and hold out, or whether the team is like, oh, 100%, we're going to get a deal done. And I hope that the producers can take a look at all of the money they're making and go, this isn't bad. Our stocks keep rising. Our shareholders are making money. We're making an exorbitant amount of money. I think the lowest pay of one of those CEOs from all the companies we're striking against was like $27 million a year. And that was the lowest. You know, I know Netflix, it was like 50 and 51 for the two CEOs. You're making more money than most humans could spend in a lifetime. Can we agree that that's beneficial for all of us? You're making a shit ton of money. We're trying to make a living. So hopefully we can. I would love to go back to the days where we judged our success as much by how much money we make, by the integrity that we hold in the relationships and the work, and how we show up and perform in the workplace, regardless of what our jobs are. You know, if I show up and I do a good job, and I make your project as good as, if not better, than it would have been without me, then your hope or desire to compensate me for that, I would hope is an immediate thing. Like, there are times where I've worked for 2 days on a television show, but it was a really intense role, and casting directors who knew my work offered me a full episode's pay because of what I was being asked to do, regardless of schedule. And I remember I was feeling really respected and being like, that's a very kind thing to do. We didn't have to fight for a fair wage. I think we could get that, but I think that we have to start thinking about this as being members of the same family and creating something together, rather than caring more about stock and shareholders, you know.
I'm going to finish off with a question I asked you the last time, which is, given the situation as it stands today, how do you see the future of entertainment?
I have to remain positive. I have to say that I think we've made some strides. And if we continue to build upon them and get a little bit more open arms from, the people who control the purse strings, then I think we have the opportunity to take a lot of these technological advances and make stories we weren't able to before, because of what that technology can do. If we do that side by side, and we get to keep our work, and crews get to keep working, and designers get to keep working, and they on the producers that get to make money, then I think we could tell some really really remarkable stories. And you know, a lot of time people talk about entertainment as being fluff, but I think it is as old as civilization. There's a need to tell stories. We can grow from them, we can learn from them. And my hope is that we keep doing that, because uh, there really is nothing better for me than working. And one of the other things that can be really fun is shooting in a city where I don't know anyone and having someone come up to me and saying, "Hey man, I served in the Marines, and you played Sergeant Morgan in the Pacific, and you told our story, and I want you to know you did it right." And we watch that every year in my household. Uh, and so thank you. And all I get to do is go, "You don't get to thank me, man. I get to thank you for your service." That kind of human interaction, because we told a story and someone lived it and we get to share that experience, to me is remarkable, So I'd like to hope that that's what we'll continue to do, and that's what everyone will want to continue to do. So I'm praying for that.
Anything else you want to add before we go that hasn't been mentioned that you maybe feel maybe needs to be brought up or discussed?
No, I'm just thankful that that you've given me an opportunity to share what it's like for us, because I think a lot of people, when I was on the strike line, I'll say this: Adam Schiff, the representative, showed up, and I wound up walking with him and talking with him for a while. And I said, "It's really kind of you to be here." And he said, "Look, a lot of my colleagues back in DC think that you're all rich and spoiled. And I know that so many of you are just blue collar union people. And to me, that's the most important thing. My mom was a school teacher. She was in unions. I watched her go on strike and have walkouts because the city of New York didn't want to pay them for what was a remarkably hard job. And so that was sort of ingrained in me, that sometimes you got to fight for what you deserve. And I don't want people to think that we're just a bunch of like rich, privileged people. We come from all kinds of backgrounds. People grew up poor, people grew up rich, people grew up in the middle. Most actors come from some kind of trauma, and we try to take that trauma and tell stories to illuminate things that we all go through. So I just appreciate that you give us a chance to sort of express what it's like for us, and it means a lot to us.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you. No, Josh, it's been really wonderful to hear your story and to hear sort of an insight into what happens in entertainment, because so many people don't know. We just take it for granted. We see something on TV and just sort of just take it as something that just happens. No process, no nothing behind it. And this allows us to learn how all of this works. I mean, and it's not even everything. I mean, we're just looking at just a section of it, just kind of the economics of it, but you've given us a lot to think about, to ponder about, and some insight to hopefully make us a little wiser about our entertainment and what it takes to make it happen. So thank you so much, Josh. I do appreciate you.
Thank you. It's really great, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.